This is an exciting time in Scotland's story, and understanding our past will help us determine our future. And when Scotland's voice is heard, it charts the way forward. This is Scotland Speaks with Salmond.
Good morning and welcome to today's special edition of Scotland Speaks with Salmond. Special because the ALBA Party have just launched their manifesto for the general election campaign in 2024, and I am here in the fantastic Yes City of Dundee. Now, avid show watchers will remember that we launched our campaign in the Yes City of Glasgow, so it seemed the appropriate thing to do to launch our manifesto in the Yes City of Dundee. Now, of course, we talked about line 1, page 1 of a manifesto being about independence, but we've even bettered that. In fact, it's on our front cover. Yes to Scottish independence. And after a very successful launch in Dundee, there are people milling around at the back, but we thought we'd show you some highlights of the launch to include Alex's opening remarks. Over to Alex.
But this is an important point in our campaign because today we launch our manifesto. This is a detailed signposting for the future of our country, a future which is transformative compared to the situation we have at present. It goes into all areas of Scottish society. It sets out the campaigns we're running now to secure justice for the Scottish people. It sets out the plans we'd have in the Scottish Parliament after the next Scottish Parliament elections, and it sets out the plan for an independent Scotland. It's not a final document. We'll present that at the Scottish elections in 2 years' time. But it sets ALBA out as the radical party of Scotland, the party which is saying yes to Scottish independence in this election campaign. It's not actually the Einstein theory of madness, because Einstein didn't actually say it, but there is a theory of madness. An example of mad behaviour is when you do the same thing time and time again, but expect a different outcome. And that is the trap which the Scottish National Party have now got itself into in beseeching Westminster to grant a referendum time and time again, and getting the same answer. In this campaign, it's been pre-answered. It's already answered by Rishi Sunak, no, and it's been pre-answered by Sir Keir Starmer, no. That is not now the route forward to Scottish independence. And we set out in page 8 of this manifesto what is the route, what is the way forward. And that is to use each and every election in Scotland as providing the opportunity for a popular mandate for independence for our country. And that is what ALBA are doing in this election campaign. We are signposting the way forward because we don't want to wait till 2 years' time till we introduce that argument to the Scottish people. And the more people understand that argument, the more they'll see that's the way forward, and the more we shall mobilise the independence voters, who currently many of them would be intent on staying at home or even worse, voting for the Unionist Labour Party. The polls are quite clear on this. 50% of our people believe in independence. Just over 30% intend to vote for the SNP. Where is that 20%? Well, that 20%, at least at the start of this campaign, were intending either not to bother or to vote for the Labour Party. And ALBA's pitch in our campaign, our 19 candidates, are driving hard at mobilising that independence support. We didn't intervene in this election to split the independence vote. We intervened in this election to mobilise independent support, to give people encouragement and hope that there is in Scotland a party which intends to deliver on Scottish independence. Now, the most appropriate election to find that mandate is the Scottish elections, and the most appropriate vote is the second vote, the list vote. It is our ambition to take 15%, a minimum of 15% of that vote, around 24 seats, in 2 years' time at the Scottish elections, to be part of a nationalist majority in that Parliament, part of a nationalist government, which will then proceed in the way that we've outlined. That will be the mandate, a popular vote mandate, a majority of the votes on that second vote to give the mandate the legitimacy of the independence campaign. And we outline in this document how you mobilise the domestic and international pressure to bend Westminster to the will of the people of Scotland. Sometimes when I listen to some nationalist politicians, as if Westminster was this all-powerful organisation, the fount of all wisdom, the organisation which either has a veto itself on the future of Scotland. It's not. There's not been a period in recorded democratic history where the Westminster institutions have been weaker. They are weak, and they are vulnerable to determination, to pressure, and to a political strategy designed to exercise the democratic will of the Scottish people. And that's exactly what we outline in this campaign, in this manifesto. Of course, Scotland is not just in a political straitjacket just now, we're in an economic straitjacket. The Institute of Fiscal Studies have ruthlessly exposed the Labour and Tory parties as the phantom manifestos that they are. They're arguing for marginal changes around the edges of fiscal policy, and the result is that austerity will continue regardless of the result of the election and regardless whether it's Sir Keir Starmer or, and it now is pretty unbelievable, Rishi, the betting man Sunak, still retains control in Westminster. Either way, Tory or Labour, Labour or Tory, red or blue Tories, this is a recipe for continued austerity in Scotland. And in economic terms, what the problem is, and it certainly will be continued by Rachel Reeves, who's as economically orthodox as a former Bank of England employee as they come, the solution to the Westminster's immediate problems doesn't lie in fiscal policy, it lies in monetary policy. Because of the mishandling by the Bank of England of the economic aggregates, they've been paying an additional £20,000 million a year in terms of servicing government and borrowing debt, and gilts are still well over 4%. The way to release the injection that public services need and to end austerity in this country is to get borrowing rates back down to proper and reasonable levels. The Bank of England should not have inflation as their one and only target, and using interest rates which have been bearing down on real businesses and real people, wrecking household and business finances as their only instrument to attain it. It's what Ted Heath once called a one-club golfer, and that club has been clubbing the businesses and people of Scotland and indeed across the United Kingdom. So in this manifesto we lay out what would be needed in terms of what would be released in terms of fiscal manoeuvrability and what objectives that the Westminster government would be wise to pursue, many of which incidentally have already been achieved in Scotland. I can't help note in passing that every time I see a list of SNP government achievements, most of them seem to be backdated more than 10 years in terms of any. There are things crucial in this manifesto for us, standing up for women and children, which Ash Regan has so nobly done as our MSP in the Scottish Parliament, as our group leader. The only person in Scottish politics who was prepared to sacrifice her job and her career to stand up for the rights of women and girls. Well, Ash, unfortunately, is indisposed today and can't be with us, but Neil Hanvey is with us, the Member of Parliament who stood up for Scotland's right of self-determination and the sovereignty of the Scottish people. Let's hear it for Neil Hanvey's contribution to ALBA. And Kenny McCaskill is with us, the candidate who, probably alone with his ALBA colleagues, has stood up for the essential principle that no self-respecting country, apart from the fact no rational country, who's a major oil and gas producer, would allow its sole refinery to close. If every Scottish MP, and in particular every MSP and every government minister, was standing up for Grangemouth in the way that Kenny McCaskill is, we'd have a totally different perspective. Can I draw your attention to a key part of this document, where we look at the range of social problems in Scotland and provide solutions to poverty, solutions to the great social ills which still bedevil our country. But there's no greater crisis than that of housing at the present moment. And we lay out in this document the plan to build 200,000 new homes over 5 years of a Scottish Government term. Today and recently, the statistics show a story that new starts in Scotland are falling to the levels of the 1980s, when there is a housing crisis of extraordinary proportions. The 200,000, by releasing 10 or 20 billion of equity from pension funds, available money to go into housing for rent, as the key part of our proposals. That 200,000 is going to be a down payment on the 600,000 homes that are required to make sure that every single family in Scotland has a safe, affordable heating, roof, secure, instead of the housing crisis that we have at the present moment. So ALBA, every vote for ALBA is counted for Scottish independence in this election. We say it's time to take real action to support families and support household incomes in the cost of living crisis. It's time to stand up to save Grangemouth from closure. It's time to stand with the workers of the North Sea and show them there's a party which will consistently support their livelihoods. It's time to harness the great resources, renewable resources of Scotland, and through a 20% public stake in every single oil field, make sure it works for the people of Scotland. We don't intend to make the same mistake as 50 years of oil and gas. Through ALBA Energy, we'll harness the power of Scotland and make it work for the people of Scotland. And we don't need a crystal ball to show how important that will be to the economic and social life of Scotland. We just need to read the book Across the North Sea and see how a country should handle a major, extraordinary resource. And this will be our second chance, which ALBA intend to seize for the people of Scotland. These are our proposals. An exciting manifesto, a radical manifesto. We are the agents of change in this election. A manifesto which will signpost the way to the future. But I tell you, in 2 years' time, these ideas will sweep this country, and we will take ALBA into a nationalist parliament, into a nationalist government, which will deliver independence for our country. Thank you very much.
And of course, after Alex made his speech, there were some questions from the broadcast media and press. Let's take a listen to them.
Well, I'm standing in, as I announced, in Banff-Buck and Coastal in the Scottish elections in 2 years' time. That is my aim and intention. I tend to lead ALBA into that next Scottish Parliament and into the next Scottish Government, which I believe will have a nationalist perspective. Let me say and explain in more detail about why ALBA are intervening in this election. Obviously, last year we repeatedly offered the SNP the idea of a pan-Scotland front, a Scotland United proposition, one candidate in each constituency. That was repeatedly rejected. But it is obvious and became obvious that the SNP were losing independent supporters. They were losing independent supporters for a variety of reasons, including their recent record in government. But they were losing independent supporters because they were losing heart about the ability or wish or determination of the Scottish Government to deliver Scottish independence. And therefore, the statistics which are quoted are clear in every single poll. Roughly 50% supporting Scottish independence, roughly somewhere in the low 30s supporting the SNP in this election. That 20% gap, other two, before ALBA's intervention, would have had the choices of either staying at home or voting for the Unionist Labour Party. Therefore, what ALBA are doing is driving towards that 20% of the people in this election, mobilising that independence vote. And it's that strategy to mobilise that vote is going to stand the cause of independence well in the 2 years to come. But I think you'll find, for those who read this manifesto, that it's a refreshing change from the economic orthodoxy which is suffocating the whole of the United Kingdom at the present moment, condemning millions of people to austerity, and the lack of vision and imagination of the Scottish Government now in standing out against that miserable, depressing view of economics. They say that economics is the dismal science. Well, it's certainly the dismal science as pursued by the Labour and Conservative parties. And that is why we devoted a passage in this manifesto to trying to articulate that we've had an entire election campaign with talented journalists asking politicians questions, and hardly a single question has been asked on the source, the immediate source of the UK's economic difficulties and why it's trending below growth, which of course is the exit Brexit from Europe, which, as we all know, has hardly been part of the campaign, but it's the mishandling of monetary policy which has destroyed more businesses, more livelihoods and more family finances than any other single factor. I haven't heard it mentioned in the campaign. Maybe I've been watching the football. But nonetheless, I thought ALBA should and have brought it to people's attention because it's important that radical parties set out a different perspective from the overwhelming orthodoxy which is taking this country to perdition. And one of my favourite stories of the 2014 referendum campaigns, I came to this city on the 1st of September 2014, and I was campaigning just beside the statue of Desperate Dan. And there was a long queue of folk. And I was wondering, is there a special happy hour being sponsored by the Dundee Courier? But no, I was told by the people in the queue that they were queuing to vote. And I said, well, look, the election's still more than 2 weeks ago. They said, no, we're queuing to register to vote. We've got to be registered now. And I said to the guy at the back of the queue, I said, look, why aren't you on the register? You've just moved into this great city of Dundee. And they said, no, I've been here all my life. I haven't been on the register since the poll tax. But he said, in this campaign, in this election, in this referendum, there's finally something worth voting for. That's why we're here registering. So, our job is to provide independent supporters with something worth voting for. And if we do that, then the Labour Party, if it does indeed succeed in gaining a foothold in this city, will be swept away in 2 years' time by ALBA.
Coming up after the break, we'll take a listen to some of your comments from last week's show, which is about the celebration of 25 years of Devolution, and our interview with Mandy Rhodes. We'll see you then.
Water is life, but not all water is equal. Our water ionizer restructures and alkalizes water for optimum hydration and detoxification, recreating the planet's ultimate water sources, found in lightning-struck lakes and newly melted icebergs. H2 Pure Source. Change your water. Change your life.
Welcome back. Here are some of our excerpts from last week's show, which was about 25 years of devolution, when Alex spoke to Holyrood magazine editor, the wonderful Mandy Rhodes. Over to Mandy and Alex.
Well, whatever achievements or lack of achievements in any one parliamentary term, the Parliament has established itself as the forum for politics in Scotland, as the grand inquest of the nation, to quote Gladstone, believe it or not. So it has solidified its position.
It has, and I guess I see that through the eyes of my son. So born in '97, he has known nothing other than Scottish Parliament. He's actually working at Westminster now, which is a bit of an irony. But yeah, I think the Scottish people accept the Parliament and see its powers.
Best thing the Parliament's done?
I think it's bred a whole new generation of politicians, and I would like to see a return to those politicians being a much more thinking, less tribal group of people. But I think that's its achievement. It's really rooted itself in Scotland. We know power sits there. I would just like to see it up its game. Okay,
you're observing the current election keenly. With just a couple of weeks to go now, what's your views?
I mean, it would be a fool probably to not go with a lot of the polls. I mean, I think we'll accept probably it's going to be a Labour government next. I think the interesting bit will be in Scotland about what it does to the SNP, how your own party does, what the Greens do, if anything. I mean, I think that's the other thing, going back to the Scottish Parliament, the Scottish Parliament elections in 26, which I believe you're going to stand out, get the old gang back together.
An early declaration it was.
Yeah.
Banff, Buck and Coastal.
I would like to see a return of smaller parties. It was meant to be that, and I think the majority, which is your fault, or the people's fault, it kind of set a bar.
But then, because the majority was interesting, because you know we started the first two terms of the Parliament were coalition governments of different balances. Then there was the Rainbow Parliament,
yeah,
one of the coalitions. Then there was a majority government, and then there've been near majority governments. So I mean, the Parliament's gone through all sorts of permutations, and that must be a good thing, isn't it?
It is, but I think after 2011, when the majority happened, it was never meant to happen. That's how parties see it now. It's almost a coalition to make a majority rather than parties working individually and having to fight for every vote.
And here's what you had to say about that show. Over to you and your tweets, messages and emails. Geronimo says, hats off to all the candidates, strong and brave people putting themselves forward to stand up and be counted. Respect to all of them. Good luck, ALBA. Good luck to all of us in Scotland. The Republic of Scotland is our future. Kizzywiz says, I look forward to these shows so much. ALBA Party and its influence is our only hope of gaining independence. And as a founding member, I think ALBA have come a long way in a short time. Well done to all those hard-working people, and of course to Alex for being such a superb leader. The original Dave says, this is the stuff Scotland needs to hear. I'm all for a plebiscite election. The past few years, the SNP set about closing all the avenues to independence. A plebiscite is the only way now. Let's take it and make independence ours. The last 10 minutes made my eyes water. Harold the Younger says, what we need is a parliament driven by the people, where the politicians understand their role, servants, not masters. And finally, Sky Echo says, excellent campaign video. Now I presume Sky Echo is referring to the ALBA party election broadcast. And of course, you're getting the chance to see that again in today's show. As proceedings come to a close here at the Marriott Hall in Dundee, and Alex is speaking to some candidates at the back, I'm just going to pull him over to close the show with his final remarks from today.
Well, the crowd are gradually leaving the Caird Hall here in Dundee. Now, I've been at a few manifesto launches, and as they go, this was a really, really good one, because we got across a distinctive message in ALBA, and that, of course, is that we're the party which has the route, the strategy to get to Scottish independence. We also got across the idea that many, many people in Scotland, because of the lack of progress over the last 10 years, have become disillusioned, disaffected with whether independence is ever going to be achieved. They're at risk of staying at home, or even worse, voting for the Labour Party. That's why the gap has opened up between the 50% of people who believe in independence, more than 60% here in the yes city of Dundee, and perhaps the 30% or so who say they'll vote for the SNP. That's the 20% that ALBA are driving for in this election, to galvanise, to motivate that independence vote. Not to split the vote, but to motivate and galvanise the independence vote. Now, this is an inspiring document. It has great concepts, obviously defending the rights of women and girls, as you'd expect from ALBA, to assert Scotland's sovereign right to self-determination, as you would expect from ALBA, to defend Grangemouth refinery and oil and gas workers, to seize the opportunity of Scotland's renewable revolution, as you would expect from ALBA. But we have solutions to some of the great social ills bedeviling Scotland. 200,000 houses we'll build in the first term when ALBA's in government. Now, in this election, every single vote that's marked for ALBA is a vote marked for Scottish independence. Every single vote is important. We may not sweep the country in this election, but we'll do a lot better than the naysayers in the media think we're going to do, because we're catching a mood. And in 2 years' time, we shall sweep the country. We shall get to at least 15% of the vote in the second vote. We shall elect 20 or 24 ALBA MSPs. They shall be part of an independence majority in that parliament, and hopefully part of an independence supporting government. Why? Because we're going to put adults back in the room of the Scottish Parliament. People who know how to run things and get things done are coming back into the Parliament, and they're coming back in with a strategy to get to Scottish independence. And that's why a vote for ALBA in this election is to register support for independence, and in 2 years' time, we'll take this country to independence. So with that, from the ALBA launch here in the yes city of Dundee, it's goodbye from Taz, goodbye from me, and we'll see you again next week, when it'll be all over for the general election, but the campaign will just be starting for Scottish freedom.
Scotland is being dragged further and further into crisis. Every day, more and more Scots are finding themselves having to make tough decisions just to get by. Rent and mortgage rates are getting higher. Energy bills have skyrocketed. Public services are underfunded. All while our income has stayed the same. Homelessness is on the rise. Drug deaths are increasing. Our industries are being closed at the time when we need them most. Our vast wealth and renewable resources are heading in the same direction as our oil. Profits swallowed up by international capital, the revenue taken by Westminster, leaving ordinary Scots behind to pay the bills.
Our country is being governed for them, not for us.
And these aren't problems with simple solutions. They require real change. And it's time to send a message.
It's time to say that we have had enough of this system that isn't working for us. That we will not pause the aspirations of the nation for self-entitled politicians at Westminster who don't care about us, who don't live here, who don't send their children to our schools, who cannot possibly represent our interests. It's time to make a stand about the nation we were, the nation we are, and the nation we will be.
We need a party with a plan. And ALBA is the party with a plan. To use the ballot box so that each election is an opportunity for the people of Scotland to choose their own future. When Alex Salmond was First Minister, the Scottish Government built things. Like the Queensferry Crossing, they got on with running the country. They earned the respect of the people. But the SNP have lost their way, and above all, lost their way on independence. ALBA know the way to get to independence, and we also know the why of independence.
getting control of Scotland's resources so we can use them to benefit the people of Scotland.
This is Grangemouth Refinery, a symbol of this campaign and the refinery that ALBA are battling to save. It symbolises Scotland because after half a century of oil and gas in massive quantities, we've become the only country with such a bounty to get relatively poorer.
And what's going to happen to Scotland's renewables?
Unless we control that resource with a public share in every field, a community share at every landfall point, then we'll have the same story as oil and gas.
The Westminster government will get the riches, and the benefits will bypass the people of Scotland again.
So ALBA stand for Scottish control of Scottish resources, so we cease to become the land of fuel poverty amid energy plenty.
We stand for a future where the destiny of our country is decided by the people who live here.
So on Thursday, July the 4th, make your vote count for independence. Vote ALBA. Vote Scotland. This is an exciting time in Scotland's story, and understanding our past will help us determine our future. And when Scotland's voice is heard, it charts the way forward. This is Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.